Saving the second best for second last, are you? Thank you. Welcome. I expected after the break everybody was just going to go back to sleep until they gambled tonight. So thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to see so many people around. We're here today to talk about dog breeds, and I wanted to start out by asking everybody, what is your favorite show dog breed, and why did you choose that to
Maine Coon.
Okay, so today we're talking about scarcity, and I know this is a topic that everybody has an idea about, and that's why I wanted to actually start out by asking the definition of scarcity. We could just go through introduce everybody, but I think this is a more interesting way to do that. So maybe like include who you are and why you do what you do, but if you think about Bitcoin, you sort of inherently think about scarcity, but there are a lot of other things that scarcity can mean, and I think there are a lot of other ways to express what we feel about scarcity. So starting here and going there, what does scarcity mean to you, Stephen Miller?
So I think for me, scarcity is really most about providing an experience that is truly unique that somebody could resonate with. And I know that's a very different way of looking at it, but within the world of generative art in particular, like we have the benefit of being able to provide very unique artwork all within one collection. So if I like one particular piece or I like one particular output, that's unique to me, right? That's uniquely scarce. So if, of course, Stephen Morse here really enjoys a different piece of work from that collection, it can still be very true to him. But as you had asked for an introduction, I never gave one, but I'm Stephen Miller, and I'm here for the art.
I'm Stephen Morse, another SM. That's how you do it. You go from one SM to the next. Art on Bitcoin scarcity, it kind of goes hand in hand. Everything being a one of one, the scarce nature of Bitcoin itself. That ability for people to resonate with a particular piece and maybe someone else doesn't. I think it's just this inherent scarcity that is, unique to ordinals. And the ability to create infinite possibilities, but yet on this scarce blockchain, these one-of-one pieces, these one-of-one satoshis, is just a really, really unique opportunity to create and connect to people through. So, I'm excited to dive into this more.
And it's not just an opportunity; it's a mandate. You can't make new tokens to attach data to, like in the NFT world, the non-fungible token world, because those are not attaching to the base currency. They're attaching to new fabricated tokens, which are inherently kind of not scarce. They're as scarce as people choose to make them, but kind of so is everything else. So we're going to wrap back around to that. But, Gerard, what is scarcity?
Well, I like to see scarcity as a way of building or even a way of being. To me, it feels just like it's going the opposite way of the general trend of today. Because today, everything is abundant. Everyone wants your attention, and everybody is giving a lot of information, creating a lot of content. And that's why I like Bitcoin, because it just feels like we're going in an opposite direction of what currently the world is going on. And yeah, that's what scarcity is to me. And a lot of artists actually understand that, and that's what they are coming to Bitcoin. It's like, okay, as an artist, I need scarcity in order to grow and also to attract potential good collectors. And Bitcoin is just perfect for that, just by nature.
Yeah, so for me, scarcity is more about space on the Bitcoin blockchain, because there is right now a lot of space that we can use, but later on it will not be. And for me, this is the big power of generative art that we are, for example, creating. Because just think, creative generative art is crazy efficient. And in the end game, when the space on the Bitcoin blockchain will be extremely scarce, then we can only create generative art because it's cheap. Code is the cheapest thing that you can really put into the blockchain. So generative art and art on Bitcoin is in fact the future of what will we be inscribing, I don't know, in 10, 20 years. That will be the end game. And we can do it now and be the first one. And this is the power for me here.
So the block size limit is the same every 10 minutes. It's 1 megabyte of op return or 4 megabytes of witness data or something like that. So it's not that the space gets more scarce or is any less scarce than any other time or whatever, but your view on this is that the demand is inherently going to be greater and it's going to pace out anybody who's not willing to really like stick in?
I was just thinking about the costs of inscribing things, because it will only go up with the price of the Bitcoin, with the, you know, the space that will be left on the Bitcoin. And at some point, you know, inscribing 4 megas will be impossible. Inscribing JPEGs will be impossible because it will be just too expensive. And the last thing that we can inscribe really on Bitcoin will be still generative art. And this is why we should create it now, because, you know, now it's the moment. Now it's the time when we are first one, but there will be a lot of it later on. And yeah, that's great.
Yesterday's the only time better than today to do that, right? And speaking of lightweight footprints of code art, who are you?
What's up, everyone? Thanks for coming out. I'm Billy, an artist on Bitcoin. With scarcity, I often think about supply and demand comes to thought, like at first. Bitcoin block space, it's very scarce, but right now it's not hugely in demand, but that still has value to me. It's only when the demand picks up that you really see that kind of price or value kind of go through the roof. And same could be said about the rare art market as well. And whether it's kind of manufactured scarcity, you know, Bitcoin's supply cap, that was a choice, or something that is physically scarce. So you could argue, you know, a precious metal or something. Another example of that is like diamonds, very expensive, but not actually that scarce. But De Beers kind of controls the diamond market, so they can have this kind of manufactured scarcity aspect to it. So that's kind of where my mind goes at first, just kind of the supply and demand mechanics. But in regards to Bitcoin, I feel like everything is scarce, and over time, that demand is just going to kind of keep putting upwards pressure because you can't increase the supply. And in the interest of like keeping things efficient, my latest project basically kind of scans the blockchain for image data and kind of uses that to kind of recreate and generate some new art. And I think that's kind of a prudent way to approach, you know, people in this room have spent so much money to inscribe things on chain, and we know Bitcoin is money, Bitcoin is a data layer, Bitcoin is a library, Bitcoin is a museum. I'm always trying to be mindful. Yeah, there's that flex, like, oh, let's take up a whole block. Let's spend, you know, let's get a 4 mega. I kind of took the opposite take of like, what's the highest resolution artwork I can get on chain with only like 45 kilobytes? And I feel like those kind of constraints can like really inspire you to be creative and find out ways to put things on chain. Because oftentimes a big critique is like, oh, there's not enough space. Like I can't put my animations on Bitcoin, but I can on IPFS. And I think you just kind of have to think outside the box, and it's almost like a challenge.
Was it Metablocks? Is that the name of the first, not the first thing, but like the exact opposite of what you recently did, where you tried to see how much data you could fit on chain, where you had inscribed like 400 different images in different blocks over the course of time and then tied them all together in this, was it 16 megabyte image, something like that?
It was like 6.25 megabytes, but that's like right after recursion came out. Right. It was a 16,000 by 16,000 pixel image. Basically, I inscribed the 400 inscriptions first and then used code to piece it back together. And that was just kind of a way to get over working with a miner to put 4 megabytes on chain. You could kind of just infinitely do whatever you wanted to. And that's just another way of like, hey, sky's the limit. What are we doing here?
So then, like, are there constraints? Is the only constraint time, patience, money?
The only constraint's your imagination, bro.
Billy.
But no, I mean, obviously, like, you know, some of the other panels just talking about ways to kind of crowdsource getting P5 libraries on chain and ways that other people can use it. I think recursion, you know, recursion is basically just referencing other data on chain. So I think it's just a powerful mechanism. And yeah, I feel like you're really limited by what you can cook up.
It's forcing us to be creative in how we go about. Like if you had if you had like a 40-bedroom house, how many couches would you accidentally have? You just like have too many. You don't need that many couches. You can only sit in one of them at a time. Realistically, you'll use 2 out of the potentially 40. But if you have like a studio apartment, you have to be really mindful about where you put that thing. And I like to look at Bitcoin as this like studio apartment that we've all decided to move into and somehow find a way to put only the necessities, only the things we care the most about here. Do you think that if you were not bound by these same constraints and you decided to release works that you've already released on Bitcoin, on say Ethereum or Solana or somewhere more IPFS centric, would the way that you have released it changed? Let's say, Stephen, I guess this is you're this Stephen. It's a pretty intricate, like when you first look at Behold, you don't see something that's on a constrained platform. You see something that's 3-dimensional and it's evolving, it's moving, it involves colors and motion, there's a menu, there's all kinds of things that like shouldn't exist if there were these constraints. Would it even look different if you didn't have constraints as from an end user goal?
So
point of view?
Yeah, I mean, like in my case, it's a little bit different because the intent behind Behold was very much so that, I mean, there are many different intents behind Behold, but one of the intents behind Behold was that I found that the market didn't understand and didn't gather much more than just an individual output. There was, I mean, yes, there are constraints and we should be acknowledging that, but shouldn't we also be trying to understand the algorithm, right? Shouldn't we be trying to see the depth with which it can actually produce incredibly diverse and rich artwork? And that to me was like the biggest thing there. So it may be a little antithetical to what you were getting at, but if you deployed that on any chain, I think it would still serve its core purpose. But what made it really important to be on Bitcoin for me was the deeper level of provenance and permanence to it. So you can explore generative art anywhere, yeah, but it's a matter of, okay, where do you think that story and that message is going to hold up the longest? So for me, I wanted to make sure that that story and that larger lesson was upheld for like literally all time as long as nodes are running.
So other than Billy, who clearly has tried to make very small art so that it's like respectful for the chain, or it's reusing things that have already been there in order to like remix stuff and make new statements about pre-existing items, because we already know that you like to do that. Did these constraints impact the end product of anybody who feels like taking this one? Did the constraints that Bitcoin has, the 400 kilobyte maximum standard transaction size or the 4 megabyte maximum block size, witness data, or whatever, did any of these constraints actually impact you as code artists? Or did they give you more playing room because now you have more than like, say, 4 kilobytes, 400 kilobytes? It's actually kind of like not constrained in a way. Did it impact the constraint? Did it impact you?
I think the scarcity and this mindset of there being some sort of constraint is kind of a misnomer, misconception. And when you start to educate yourself on what you can do with code-based art on a native code currency, Bitcoin, it's just the possibilities are truly infinite. And really, yeah, your imagination is the limit. And you could spend your life creating single code. And that outcome is going to be, a one-of-one scarce piece. But it's really the educating people to understand that it's not just about immutability, scarcity. It's these constraints lead to innovation. Could I have done with Cosmogenesis on a different blockchain? Definitely not.
Not on the blockchain. You could have done it somewhere else through a smart contract and then hit it on a different server, right? It wouldn't be on-chain, though.
It wouldn't be on-chain, and you can't have those, like the additional things like the narratives and all of the things you can weave into the art and make it this holistic work. This fully encapsulated thing with the narrative, with the innovation, with the visual, with the immersion and interactivity and exportability. I mean, what other chain can allow for that? And Bitcoin, being scarce in its nature, it's just, yeah, I think it's really about opening up your mind, and it leads to innovation. It's flipping it on its head.
And being able to use common coding languages like HTML and JavaScript, so that's not a constraint. It's the exact opposite of a constraint.
Endless.
So again,
I feel like people don't talk about how cool it is to build on Bitcoin. Like the UTXO model, I just feel like it's just interesting. Like there was this clip that went viral about people saying like, I like Ethereum because I think about what's going to be around in 50 years. It's like, is anyone going to mention Bitcoin? Like,
Crickets.
7 times market cap Bitcoin out there.
Never
but
heard
no,
of it.
I just find like the whole system of inscribing the data on in the same system that you're tokenizing the data makes a ton of sense to me. And then when you have things hard-coded into the meta protocol, like uncommon sats and sat rarity, when you combine that, you can only do that on Bitcoin. I don't feel like people talk about how that's pretty cool. It's basically Bitcoin's kind of set up like a website where you can just kind of call to other things, and it's all self-contained.
It's extremely elegant. That's how I would say it. Like, inscribing art on Bitcoin, when you think about it, it's super elegant, but it's also extremely simple. And that's the funniest part. Everybody's talking about the constraints, but to me, the constraints are the other blockchains. Like, having your art disappearing after 1, 2, 3 years, isn't that the real constraint?
It's only been 3
when
years.
You think about
it's
it.
gone.
Like, exactly. So I think it's just changing your mindset. And at Vivid, we have the chance working with a lot of artists. And it's funny because the artists that have started doing generative art on Bitcoin do have a complete different mindset, and they don't look at it as a constraint at all. And they come with very creative forms of inscribing their art. I'm thinking right now, Medusa, one of the artists we're working with, he just inscribed an artwork, final piece. It's 13, 40 megabyte artwork, and he's just inscribing a few lines of code that are actually instructions on how the algorithm has to paint the actual artwork. So he never asked himself, oh, how can I beat this constraint? No, it's just, I have to inscribe my art on Bitcoin because I want it to last, and because of all the other things that it brings for an artist. And then he just creates. That's all. The constraints are on the other blockchains. That's the reality.
Yeah, for me, the constraints is the biggest and most powerful part of the Bitcoin art. Why? Because when you think about it, it just enforces you to use the right coding practice. It's like, you have, for example, sandboxing, that it prohibits you from connecting to some other endpoints. On Ethereum, you can do it. You can connect to the mempool website or other website and take any data you want. But on Bitcoin, it's totally impossible. And it's strength. Why? Because these endpoints can go off, and then the artwork will stop working. And here, on Bitcoin, everything is thought in the way that you should, in fact, code that way on any blockchain that exists. But you are enforced to do it only on Bitcoin. This constraints was really, really good idea for the one who made it, from the guys from the Ordinals protocols, or even with the space that we need to use, because it's enforcing the best coding practice that programmers who are creating art on Bitcoin or generative art are using. So yeah, from my perspective, this is the strength, because we will have cleaner, better projects on Bitcoin, and we cannot, maybe we can, but we shouldn't, and it's prohibited by the protocol to do some shit, It's just impossible.
You think 2 times
Bitcoin.
before inscribing something.
Yeah, exactly. You need to think what you are doing, because then you will just have the art that will not work on this blockchain. And yeah, that's great, because we will have working good art, or any other project, in fact.
Well, we're getting the hand wave to get off stage soon, so I think we can finalize maybe from Billy back to me. Sorry to put you on the spot if this is a weird question. It shouldn't be. The constraints, scarcity, friction, sats, UTXOs, whatever angle you want to attack this from, what do you think your next boundary push is going to be? Where are you going to go next? What sort of exploration do you want to do with regards to scarcity and constraints?
I mean, personally, I'd like to explore some mechanisms for rendering things in real time. I try and look at what is the problem and try and kind of dig at what could be a solution. And I see a lot of artists, like 3D artists. I've been a 3D artist for multiple decades, and it's like, well, I can't fit Rafiq Anadol's giant animation on chain, but I do think there's probably a creative, cool way to render that in real time. So I think that's kind of the next step. Probably got to holler at shaderism for sure.
It's like he knew you were next when he said this. What's the next push for you? Is it going to be more rendering in real time?
Yeah, I really like rendering in real time, but in fact what I would be focusing on is like a connection between other pieces, because for me really the strength of Ordinal is that we can, you know, in a recursive way take some data from other pieces and use it. And I want really explore this connection in the Ordinal ecosystem, like for example your last project, but in a
Last week? Like last week or?
the recursion one. But yeah, I was more thinking about, you know, going really deep into this recursion things and really use it in some creative other way.
Before you go real quick, I just want to clarify. Anybody out there who's like not, I'm seeing a lot of new faces. I don't know what your knowledge levels are here, but recursion is when you reference in a new inscription something that has already been inscribed on chain. So it's not like you're referencing something off chain. You're finding things that are already on chain and doing stuff with them in a new inscription, but it all still lives on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's not like going somewhere else.
Well, to me, the next boundary to push is outside of the chain. It's more on the how we approach art. It has been pretty funny on how these art projects from 2020, 2021, on Ethereum mainly, have approached art. And I guess it's also because of the nature of generative art. But we really can see that this is not a sustainable business model or way of approaching art. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do at Vivid, it's bringing what's good from traditional art projects such as galleries and trying to implement that in the digital world. When you think about it, everything is being digitalized. One of the last things to digitalize is art and the gallery model. And I always say this, when I look at a physical gallery, of course, it's amazing, but it looks like something that's going to disappear, or at least, you know, be replaced by a digital art gallery. So that's the next boundary, how we digitalize the gallery model. And I think that on Bitcoin is just the perfect way of doing it, because by nature, it looks a lot like what the traditional art market, how the traditional art market works. So yeah, that's the next mission.
That's a strange one because digital art has been happening for like decades, since computers really, but it hasn't been tokenizable and ownable, at least not in the same way as it started to be in like 2017. So large institutions had no way of owning and thereby being motivated to display any of it. Now we're seeing that start to take place, but it's still like, does the digital art fit in a physical space, or does it fit in a digital space, or does it fit in both? We'll see, right? Exactly. Boundaries, Stephen? Do you have any?
It's not a what's you're saying? It's not a feature.
Yeah, it's a feature.
It's
not
a feature,
bug.
not a, it's yeah, right. It's not a bug. It's a feature. Yeah, and there are no problems. There's only solutions. Boundaries, creativity can go beyond boundaries. You know, it's finding ways to work within those constraints and create efficient works and have them interact with the chain and interact with the end user, and then yeah, I think there are no boundaries realistically. I think Bitcoin and ordinals and art on Bitcoin, it just really knocks the door down for the art world completely, and it just takes more understanding and pushing into the traditional space, you know, for people to understand, and then understand, of course, true ownership also, which I think, you know, you guys at Vivid are doing a great job at pushing that. So there's no boundaries.
The constraints, if there are any, are sometimes helpful. Like when you go to a restaurant and they're like, sit anywhere you want. You're like, what? How am I supposed to figure that out? Then they walk you to your table. Now you just get to have a cool experience because you have like a more limited scope of what's possible. So maybe there is some sort of like unlock in how constrained we feel like we might be, even if you don't feel like it.
I think it's mindset, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of round things out, and as like one of the most compact individuals in the art space, I figure I should try to keep this very brief for Brett's sake. When I think about the boundaries right now, I think the biggest thing is really that of humanity, and the fact that we are really, really struggling with understanding that while our art may live on the chain, we don't. So when you look at what we're actually putting on chain, the boundary right now is the understanding that we need context to exist on chain. So again, if you're out there and you're thinking about, okay, how do you solve for that? The beautiful thing is there are many ways to solve it. The question is as an artist, what are you going to do to solve it? And I would encourage everybody to think outside of the box on that one, because it is something that we really do need, because God forbid any one of us fall off this stage and get hurt in some dramatic way. If our art doesn't have that context, it doesn't live on. It then is completely on the collector to steward that work, and it then takes on their own message. So I would live that challenge and say that's the boundary right now.
What are you going to do? Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Back to Brett. Thanks.
Thank you.